Hello and welcome to the Game Line, Wales Online's daily rugby debate show. I'm Ben James. I'm joined by Simon Thomas and Andy Howell. We've got a fair bit to talk about, so let's not waste any time. Let's get straight into it. First up, we've got a quarter final coming up on the way this weekend. Wales against France. And Simon, I believe you've been sort of infiltrating the French camp, so to speak, and getting the view from across the channel.
Yes, inside Le Bleu, as it were. I spoke to Davies, who's a good friend of mine, works for the Sud-Ouest, Southwest newspaper in France. He's a rugby journalist, and he's out in Japan. And so I've been picking his brains about the mood in the camp. There's been so much talk about the rifts. I mean, there's nothing new for France at a World Cup. But I think generally the thing that struck me was that they fancy themselves. I get that impression, despite everything that's going on, a couple of injury issues, talks about the captain, Garrado, and the coaches, falling out. There's a feeling that they have a big game inside them. And, they're certainly not taking it as a fait accompli, to use some French.
Indeed. Just a reminder that this is a live show for you, the agenda dictated by you, so get your questions in. We've got a couple of questions already. One from Mark here asks, are we in danger of taking France too lightly? Obviously, remember, you think back to that Six Nations opener in Paris, and well, they gifted us the win more than anything, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the record, I think Wales have won 7 their last 8 against France, but generally they've been quite close matches. Perhaps Wales have come out on top in the last 10, 15 minutes, war of attrition. And, I read Simon's piece, and what struck me in it was, if it was England, they would be fearful. It's Wales. They think they can beat Wales. And, people shouldn't be too overconfident about this match, because if France hit the straps like they did for 35 minutes against Argentina in their opener, they're going to be dangerous opponents.
It was interesting. I asked Arno to pick out the 3 main French danger men, and interestingly, 2 of them are people who there are fitness doubts over. Dupont, the scrum half, and Pinot, the wing. Now, the latest information is that Dupont seems to be back in training, seems to have recovered from his back problem, but Pinot is still struggling from lower stomach or groin strain. He would be a big loss on the wing, because he's something you can make something happen. He has got that X factor. The other man he mentioned was Charles Olivon, who probably not that well known to a lot of sort of Welsh fans, because he has a lot of injury problems. He's had shoulder issues. He plays on the 7 on the open side flank for France, and he's been key. He's brought them a sort of physicality, and he's kind of the missing link in that back row. And I think with Dupont likely to start, Olivon there as well, they will be very strong around that fringe area. And they've got a man in Raka, Alvaretti Vraka, who'd come in for Pinot, and he was, I thought, their best player against Tonga. He's, very, very strong, very quick. So they've got threats. There's no doubt about that. But what was encouraging for me was that Anna was saying that they've had a few problems with the scrum, which, given we've had a few issues ourselves, that's quick. They're 19th on the list of scrum percentage.
Yeah, I was actually very surprised by their scrummage performance against Argentina, because Argentina's scrum has been awful for a long while, yet they had the better of it against France. I thought France would turn the screw on them there, but no, they didn't. So that's a good sign for me, because I think a key area of this match would be the scrum. If the Welsh scrum was under pressure, that would help the French enormously. So if Wales can weather that up front, and even better, perhaps get on top, they're really in business.
It would be interesting, and wanted to see who does captain the side of the weekend, because there's been so much talk about this, about Garrado, who's the captain. We hear that after the England game in the Six Nations, the coaches wanted to replace him as captain. There's been talk about it happening again in the last 2 group matches. Jefferson Poirot played as captain. I think there's a feeling that the coaches, if they had their way, might change the captain. But the players stood by Garrado and the Six Nations. They seem to be standing by him again now. So it will be fascinating to see who does captain the side.
I covered the 2011 World Cup. I can remember being at a press conference before the semi-final with Wales. They were wheeling players in. There was one consistent person on the top table. They then coach Mark Livermont, and during his press conference, there was hundreds of journalists there, and the French players being grilled about the mutiny that was taking place at the time. And even though Livermont was sat alongside him, they were calling for his head. It was unbelievable. And they were just criticising him, and the bloke just sat there passive and took dinner. But of course, what happened then? France got to the final of the World Cup, and arguably the refereeing decision away from winning it.
It's crazy. You've got Toulon owner Mourad Boujadal calling for the players to kick out the coaches, have a coup d'etat and a French revolt. I mean, it wouldn't be a World Cup without something like that.
Exactly, it's French rugby. I suppose that's one cliche of French rugby, is we never know sort of A World Cup's always going to be like that. The other French cliches, you never know which side is going to turn up, and that's probably summed up their 3 games so far. Is we've not really seen an 80-minute performance, so we've seen sort of mixed bag. We've seen offloading game that looks good. They tend to go after the breakdown quite heavily, which is perhaps a little bit odd because they don't look well stocked to really chase that sort of game. Is that just does that come down to coaching again?
I'd say the way they played for about 35 minutes in the first half against Argentina, that's some of the best rugby we've seen for any team in this tournament. And in the second half, Argentina took control and France really fell away from it. Against Tonga, they were very lacklustre, I thought. So they have certainly played in fits and starts. You could say the same thing about Wales to a certain extent.
They do that, mind, at the club level as well, don't they? Teams like Clermont, Toulon and all, they'll turn it on for 10 minutes, score like 2-3 tries, think the job's done, and then totally switch off. And that's just a trait about their rugby.
A young side as well. I mean, if you look at what they've got there with Dupont and Ntamak, that makes me feel very old, than Ntamak playing at 10, recovering his father. So I mean, there's certainly a lot of talent in that back division. You look at the likes of Huget, you look at Gail Ficou and Ntamak. We talked about Penno and Medard, the older figure at the back, still a class player. It's not going to be easy, Anderson.
It's not going to be easy, and this is actually only the second time Wales have played them in a Rugby World Cup. Yeah, it's not going to be easy, but I think Wales got a bit too much for them.
Okay,
if Wales can do a number on them early on, I don't think there's any way France would come back. I think France need to make a good start this match.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay, well, that's that put to bed. We spoke there about French quality in the back line, but Wales do have quality of their own. But one of their players, or a few of their players, injury doubts. One of them is Jonathan Davies. But a bit of promising sort of news this morning. We've seen him training. Footage has emerged training out in Japan, except his leg is quite heavily strapped.
You see a lot of strapping these days on players, don't you? I mean, the fact that he's out in the training field has got to be a positive. He's so important to Wales. You saw that in the game against Fiji when it was in the balance. Just that breakdown the narrower side, the trademark fend, and then superb one-handed offload to Josh Adams. When the game needed it, his class came through. So important from a defensive point of view with his organisation, and we are quite thin at centre, aren't we? Only 3 specialist centres on the trip.
Yeah, when we look at the footage we've just seen there, he is fairly heavily strapping. Occasionally, for me, there he is bouncing off his left leg.
Well, yeah.
So that he's not just running in straight lines. So that suggests, that he can move laterally, which of course he's going to have to do in a rugby match. Big question for Wales is: do they risk him against France, or think, we're going to beat France anyway and get to the semi-finals? We need him late in the tournament. Does he play this game and risk perhaps breaking down and being out of the tournament? What do you do?
I think you have to play him. It's such an important game. If it goes wrong in that match, that's the tournament over. And he's just a key figure and need his experience, need his leadership there as well. And he's a game breaker. So I think, if they consider him fit to get through 60, 70 minutes, then you play him.
I suppose once again Wales's lack of depth in midfield is sort of exposed, isn't it? Because we're now going to go into this France game with presumably 2 sort of centres who are strapped together. Hadley Parks has still got that fractured metacarpal in his hand. I think he's the most handling errors in the tournament, 9 handling errors, more than any other player. I suppose a large part of that can be put down to the fact that he's been playing since game 1 with strapping on his hand.
If you look at the last game against Uruguay, both of the tries, the first 2 tries that Halame must have disallowed, the passes that went forward from Parks, obviously it may well be the case that his hand injury is impairing his passing to some degree. I think what he also will say about Sunday rather, is that if Jonathan Davies does play, which we hope he will, I think it makes it all the more likely that it would go to Owen Watkin on the bench. Although Halfpenny was man of the match against Uruguay, did really well, I think they would feel they need to have a specialist centre cover on the bench, given you've got your 2 starting centres have both had injury issues during the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. Watkin would have to be on the bench. Otherwise, if Davies doesn't make it, Watkin be playing, and Halfpenny be on the bench, and George North, let's say, hope he's fit because he's had a rolled ankle, that he would have to cover centre.
It's looking like George North is going to be fit. I suppose if he does play, we'll be hoping that he gets involved in proceedings a bit more, because it's been the Josh Adams show, hasn't it? And we've got a question here from Tom. He says, do we think that Josh Adams will beat Shane's record? and potentially even join the World Cup greats on 8 tries. We have Jonah Lomu who scored 8 tries. Julian Surveyor 2015 got 8, didn't he?
He's got 5.
So he's on his way.
If Wales were to go all the way and play 3 more matches, he's got a really good chance.
Yeah, I just totally agree with that. As regards breaking Shane's record, he's still early days in his international career. I think it's too soon to start talking about it.
Okay, well, it's not just Wales who are in action this weekend. There are 3 other quarterfinals. Japan versus South Africa, a mouth-watering rematch of that 2015 Miracle in Brighton. That's on the Sunday, but let's start with the Saturday games. I know that, Andy, you've done a piece on this, sort of talking about how closely matched all these quarterfinals are. England, Australia, and then New Zealand, Ireland on the Saturday.
Yeah, when you look at the 4 quarterfinals, this is probably the most competitive quarterfinals in the history of the World Cup. None of these matches really have gimmies. Starting with that England-Australia match, England haven't lost to Australia since the 2015 World Cup when the York Wallabies put them away at Twickenham. So they've got psychologically they might have a bit better of Australia, and of course England have got a power pack, a juggernaut pack, and that might be just a bit too good for Australia over the 80 minutes. But if Australia gets some ball, man, they've got some X-rated runners who will cause problems. Key man there is Billy Vunipola. If he's fit, England definitely win. If he's not, it would be harder for them.
Are England running the risk of not being, it's a word that's thrown about a lot, battled hard? And they've only played 3 games, not really been tested.
Yeah, it's out of their control, really, isn't it? I mean, Eddie Jones doesn't seem too bothered. He seems to have quite relished the extra time he's had for preparation. I agree with Andy on Vunipola, though. I mean, they are a different team with him in the side. He gets them over the gain line just consistently, and it's so much easier for a set of backs and half backs to sort of control matters when that's the case. I think it's a tough game to call, though. I think Australia are kind of by default are starting to find their better back division. I mean, we've all talked about Tumua. I think he's come through and been a key man for them. Nick White probably, and we would have been White or Janira. Interesting decisions to make there, but the subplot for me is Checo against Eddie Jones, 2 interesting characters, 2 Australians. And I think as the game gets nearer, you'll probably see a few more grenades being thrown, won't you?
Eddie's always had the better of Checker, though, when it comes to the verbals beforehand. In fact, he scored that heavily back in 2016 when England whitewashed Australia over there. Steve Hansen couldn't resist, stuck his nose in there and accused Eddie of bullying Checker.
I mean, the interesting thing with me as well is, I think Pocock, as the tournament is going, he was well documented. He hadn't hardly played in 6 months, and I think against Wales he was negated to a large degree. But I think as the tournament's gone, you can see him refinding his match fitness, refinding his form, and I think he is an absolute pivotal man. I think the battle is fascinating with Pocock and Hooper up against, I would imagine, Curry and Underhill. You've got 4 people there, excellent over the ball. Bring other strengths as well. Underhill with his tackling, his carrying. I think that battle, combined with Vunipola's influence, that back row battle, the contact area, the breakdown, that'll decide it.
I think England have got better locks, though. I told you it could have a huge role to play in this game as well.
There we go. So predictions, neck and neck on the line time?
England for me.
Yeah, England have too much power.
Okay, so we'll move on to the second game, which is New Zealand against Ireland. New Zealand comes to this as obvious favourites, but Ireland, while it's not been a vintage tournament for them so far, they've got a good previous record against New Zealand in recent years.
Well, they've beaten them twice. They beat them famously in America and then also at home. I think if they're going to win, they have to simplify it and go back to Schmidt's template Mark 1, and we know what that is. It's carry after carry after carry from their forwards, from the likes of Ryan, Stander, Furlong, Omani, just coming at them best time and time again. It's when they've been at their most efficient, really. And then when you have that, on top of that, you have Conor Murray's box kicking, which is vital for the Lions when they drew the series against the All Blacks. He's highly respected out in New Zealand. And then Sexton, if he's fit, he's always been in doubt about that recently, but if you've got a pack of forwards going remorselessly forward and you've got world-class halfbacks, you've got a chance. So I think it's going to be closer maybe than people think.
Yeah, Ireland are going to have to play a lot better than they have this year, because I'd argue they've gone over the top now. They're heading downhill. They've had to see the best of this team, but I would also say the same about the New Zealand team. If you took the magic of Bowden Barrett out of that team and some of the stuff Hardy Surveyor does, New Zealand, it wouldn't be a great New Zealand team, because of course they're in transition. They've lost so many players. People like Kieran Reid as well, like Sexton coming towards the end of his career. I just wonder if Ireland have got one big game in them this tournament, and will this be it? Because if they play their best, they are capable of winning this match, providing they can shackle Barrett.
I sometimes think with games like this, a team like the way Ireland play, it's very hard to break down a sort of resolute Samoa or Russia, teams that are just not going to be interested in playing with the ball, just we're going to defend. When you put maybe against New Zealand, that game plan becomes a bit more effective.
Well, the other thing, of course, they did when they beat New Zealand in Dublin, they looked to play behind them in the corners. If you look at the try, the Stockdale scored, won them the game. They looked to stress them there. My overall view is that I think Ireland, to win, they'd probably have to really monopolise possession, because if you look at New Zealand now, there's been a lot of talk about Barrett moving to full back. And some people think, why do it? He was the best number 10 in the world. But they've now got arguably the two best number 10s in the world working together with him and Richie Mo'unga. And it's the way they dovetail and the way in which they act as dual playmakers, decision makers. They have so much threat on the ball now. So unless Ireland can really starve them of possession, I think with the likes of Surveyor, Carey and Retallick coming back in as well, and the threat they pose behind, I find it hard to see Ireland winning, to be honest.
I offer a counter view to that, because when Ireland beat them in Chicago, they actually took the game to him, and he moved it quite a lot and took it on. And I think it's a view as well of Warren Gatland has expressed in the past, you've got to take New Zealand on, not at their own game, but you've got to test them in every department. It's no good just playing tight all the time, kicking the ball away.
But do they have the confidence with ball in hand to do that at the moment?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And looking at their performances, in 2019, it's just the conditions could help them.
The conditions in Japan have probably been conducive to teams not having the ball. You haven't seen many teams go through multiple phases in this tournament, I think.
But the one team that's absolutely comfortable with the ball is Japan.
Yeah, exactly.
Most of the teams, Wales, if you think about it, against Uruguay, it made you realise that quite often Wales can look better without the ball.
Exactly, which isn't a negative. I think there's a weird sort of mindset that rugby has to be played with ball in hand when you can win matches comfortably without it. But we'll move on, because you mentioned Japan. We'll move on to the third game.
Do you want a prediction on that, Ben?
Oh, go on.
New Zealand.
Yeah, I'd say New Zealand as well.
There we go. Third game. Are we going to see a repeat of the Miracle of Brighton? Will there be a film in 4 years' time?
Well, I don't know, we talked there about retaining the ball. There was one stat that got me. I think Charlie Morgan did it in the papers this week about Nagare, the Japanese scrum half in the game against Scotland. I think he handled the ball around 50 to 60 times. 57 times and didn't kick it once. Now that tells you everything you need to know about the way Japan are playing. I mean, their offloading and handling game against Scotland was mesmerising. They've grown through the tournament. Stuttering start against Japan, famous victory over Ireland, played some nice rugby against Samoa, and against Scotland they just absolutely delivered their A game. And the way in which they keep the ball alive, and it's the speed of those short passes, they're just a joy to watch. I think everyone's second team in this World Cup is now Japan.
Yeah, it's their skills and speed, and they make the ball do the work. They often beat people for just their handling, the timing of their passes. They masters it. Where they could also score as well in this match is because of the clampdown on high tackles. And South Africa will know that they cannot go high. They risk a red, cards, same as the other team's mind. But when Japan attacking with their foot movement, etc., it's more likely perhaps that the opposition are going to get into trouble making those tackles. And because you can't go high, that means it's easier for the attacking player to offload, which does suit the Japanese way of playing. I
mean, I did the team of the tournament. We talked about it between ourselves over the last couple of weeks and came up with a group stage, and I had 4 Japanese players in there. I could easily have had 6 or 7 in there. So when you put it that way, you really have to take them seriously. Now, it is also worth noting that in one of the last warm-up games before the tournament, Japan hosted South Africa and lost, I think it was 41-7. It was a very one-sided affair. So on that basis, you would expect South Africa to come out on top. And I think probably if there is somewhere where you can target Japan, it is the sheer lack of size and lack of physicality of their front five. I mean, South Africa are just beasts of men. You look at the second row options they've got with Estebes, Mostet, De Jager, and Snyman, and they are
huge,
just absolutely huge. They got two of the best hookers in the world, maybe three if you include Brits as well. And the back row, Vermeulen, I think, is one of the best number 8s in the world. And you look as well at Steph Dutoit, who's just such an improved player over the last couple of years. They're a powerful beast of a side.
However, if Japan get ball and get some decent ball, they're going to trouble any team. So, and they've got this wave. They're the hosts. They've got this wave. With the typhoon as well. That's probably be inspiring even more if they need it. And so they're not gonna, they're not gonna lie down for South Africa. They're gonna really give it a go. This could be a really high-scoring match. We could be talking 40 points to 25 or something.
You got two excellent coaches as well.
What's your prediction there?
I'm sticking with South Africa. Tipped them to win the tournament, so that's the way I'm going. I think they could still have just too much size and could strangle Japan.
Yeah, the sheer size of South Africa and then the X factor of Colby on the wing. I think those two things will take them to victory.
Okay. Is it too early in the week for you two to stick your neck on the line for Wales-France, or is that?
Oh, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
Here we go then. Let's get it.
I'll go for Wales.
I think there's every reason to believe Wales can win and will win the match.
Have you two just agreed on 4 predictions?
That's terrifying. Find something we'll disagree on, please.
Yeah, let's get some fan questions quickly. I don't want to end on that bombshell. Here we go. Let's get a few questions. So Myron asks, if Navidi and Tipuric are nailed on to start in the back row, who gets the final spot, Moriarty or Wainwright?
Well, I would actually say that Wainwright is absolutely nailed on as well. In my view, he should be. If you look at what he brings, just look at that Uruguay game where Wales was stuttering for a lot of it, but he was the one person who just brought a different dynamic to it. When he came onto the ball, they looked a different side. He does it with such pace, such dynamism, such aggression as well, which you've seen coming out of him as well. And he showed he can play at number 8. I personally would go Wainwright 8 with Tipuric and Navidi on the flanks.
That was interesting about Wainwright being 8, of course, because that's like the first time at pro level he's ever played a number 8, as far as I can recall.
You wouldn't have known it, would you?
No, but he is a natural athlete, isn't he? He's got great footwork and all that as well. I'd agree with that back row. That should be,
me, isn't it?
Yeah. However, I might still. I know. However, I might in certain situations I would have Navidi at number 8, and on opposition, when opposition got to put in a scrum, and Wales got to put in a scrum, I would have Wainwright packing down.
To me, it reminds me of the 2011 World Cup where you had the likes. I think Warburton, Lidget, and Faletau were all young men in their early 20s, and they all came into that fearless and just brought such a vim and vigour to the side. And that's what Wainwright. It doesn't seem to everything he's asked to do. He accepts the challenge and takes it on and rises to that challenge, and he just brings such a spark with ball in hand. I think he could be a key man for Wales this weekend.
Indeed. John asks now, have we been a bit too honest at scrum time to date in the tournament? Seem to be staying very square and driving straight, yet we don't seem to be getting significant rewards from the referee.
Where's Graham Price when you need him?
Well, Wales are following the rules, aren't they? So they're scrummaging legally. They've been really tested at the scrum this tournament. There was a few penalties, wasn't there, against Australia. But when you look at the matches Wales have played in, certainly against Fiji and Australia, there wasn't really that many scrums in the game. I suppose
if you're struggling at scrum time, which Wales probably are a little bit, when you do start throwing a few angles in, or it might become a bit obvious to the referee. You look at that Nicky Smith penalty for walking around against Australia.
Yeah.
When your scrum's going background, walking around penalties are going to be all the more obvious for the referee to point out.
The scrum has actually probably been a little bit less of a worry than we thought it might be. I think Wyn Jones stepping in on the loose set, he's done a good job there. Certainly against Uruguay, it was solid as well. When he moves on to even when he came on the tight head, he showed just how versatile a player is. He's become a big man for Wales. I think what you will see against South Africa, I would imagine, is trying to get a lot of quick ball, which obviously could have an impact on what they do at number 8 in terms of someone would they then feel that if they're looking to get very quick channel 1 ball, would Wainwright have the experience in number 8 to play there? Maybe that might go it's difficult, isn't it?
It's difficult to get quick channel 1 ball these days because hookers don't tend to hook, do they? You just push it over the ball, so you don't get flying out of there that often.
It is tricky. But basically, as with everything, you've got to find your ways around it.
Yeah, Wales, as Graham Price has said, Wales have improved scrummaging wise this tournament, but the real test is ahead of them. France, despite their wobbles at the scrum so far, could provide us with a test, and then we'll have to see if we get past that test. We'll have to see who we're playing in the semi-finals.
Well, of course, there's a bit of a history with Wales and scrummaging issues against France in recent years. That 100-minute game I hope it's not going to be 100-minute again this weekend.
We're having our lunch with the early kick-off at that point. One final question we'll go for is, Hal will ask, can you bring up that Brett Impey's comments? It's caused a few sort of headlines, isn't it, in the last day or so. So let's just quickly touch upon that.
Well, essentially what he's raised is the question regarding players of Pacific Island birth or descendant. And what he's suggesting is that there should be a change to the eligibility rules of World Rugby so that a player who, for example, represented New Zealand could, after maybe a year or so, when they've moved away from New Zealand, therefore ineligible for the All Blacks any longer, that they could become eligible to play for another country. I mean, he used the example of Charles Piutau. I think it was Stephen Lukaka at the Bristol player. And Piutau was born in New Zealand, but obviously has island, heritage. So the suggestion is that they would be stronger sides if there was like a moratorium, I don't know, after a couple of years. And what he did do, I think, which was really sort of set the cat among the pigeons, he's pointed the finger at blaming England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, the Northern Hemisphere sides. He almost accused them of colonialism. He pulled away slightly, but his viewpoint was, I think, get the impression, what I understand, is that he's saying, well, those countries have blocked that eligibility rule. Now, a lot of people, and I think Andy will take up this argument, might feel that there's a slight bit of hypocrisy involved.
Well, it absolutely is, because if you look back to 2005, that New Zealand team had beat the Lions, there were a lot of players who actually in that New Zealand team were born in Pacific Islands. It's changed over there now, so maybe this is why he feels he's able to speak out, because there's a lot of second generation Pacific Islanders who have been born in New Zealand and now play for New Zealand. But he's saying about Stephen Lauatua, Steve Hansen made every attempt to get him to go back play for the All Blacks, but he's on such big money in Bristol that he didn't want to go back. And I just wonder if this is applied by New Zealand, because the eligibility rules are changing anyway, aren't they, with a 5-year qualification. If this is applied by New Zealand, the South Pacific Islanders think, well, I'll go and play for New Zealand now, I'll throw in my lot with them. If I don't make it, I'll be able to go back after a year and play for Tonga, Fiji or Samoa. So in New Zealand, trying to get the best out of both worlds here. And I don't think it's right what he's saying, because he's almost saying to those guys, you come here, try your luck with the All Blacks. If you're not good enough, you can go back and play for some other nation. What does that say?
Well, I mean, they tried it in rugby league, didn't they?
Yeah.
I think, didn't we say ironically that New Zealand got beaten by
Tonga,
by including people who had played for other countries. I mean, I'd agree that it'd be fantastic to see the Pacific Islands stronger, and you look around. But the biggest issue is you look at the tournaments and how many Fijian, how many Samoan-born, how many Tongan-born players are playing, and from other countries. We've seen it with Australia, with Karevi and Karabate. We're going to see it now with France as well.
It comes down to economics, though, doesn't it? Because some of those players are offered schooling in the likes of New Zealand,
they're moving
Australia.
away for finance.
They're moving away for finance. Nathan Hughes, Fijian, was playing for England, number 8. He was quite open about it. I'm playing for England because it's 20 grand a game.
I mean,
He said, I play for Fiji and I won't get anything more.
The ideal scenario would be if these Pacific Island players played for the islands from the outset, but you know the reasons why they move.
I'll tell you what, we'll wrap it up there, because it's getting a little bit long, this show, and I'm still reeling from the fact that you two agreed on pretty much everything.
I know, we'll have to work on that, Anne.
Indeed we will, but until then you can catch everything on Wales Online, and we'll be back again the same time tomorrow for another Game Line.